Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Bryan Cole, as was mentioned, and my company is Axia Concepts. And unlike some of the other folks, I didn't have a picture of our staff, so I thought you might want to take one. I am the company, so it's important to note that because when you're a one-man systems integrator and also get other illustrious duties like accounting and accounts payable and accounts receivable, you need to be really careful about support because I can't clone myself. And so keep that in mind as I tell you a little bit about what I've done in the Dante world. And my message to you all here is just to let you know that it's okay. If you're on the edge and you're not sure and you hear all these great presentations from these huge facilities that are implementing Dante, and you go, yeah, but I don't have the guy on site there all day long every day. I've gotten away with murder with Dante, so I just thought you might know that. And title of the slide here. I usually just talk, so you might see me talk, and then I'll look back and see if I'm on track. So that's my message: is that Dante scales up and down. I work in the House of Worship segment, and I'm working with churches, and I'm kind of between a system integrator and a consultant, and I work with churches that do a lot of do-it-themselves and have run into stability issues. In other words, they've grown, and connecting this to that, and that one, and then we'll add this one over here after a time becomes, the instruction sheet with the order of power on, power off becomes a little bit unmanageable. So I help them sort that out. And so I do a lot of system design, and then I'll do the commissioning, and they run the wires and crawl under stages and all that kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun. And I use Dante in just about every process, every church that I work with. And so from permanent install to portable. Most of my projects are right in the middle of that, about 500, 400 seat churches, some 700 seat churches and the like. And one of the early reasons that I used Dante was because of the fact that it just made things cheaper. Remember, I'm working with churches that aren't used to paying someone for a function. And so when things that might be normal to a turnkey integrator, it's not normal for my clients because they've never seen dollars like that before. And so I'm always looking for ways to make it less expensive for them. And one of the ways I was able to do that in a church that I'll talk about a little later is with simplification of the cost of the infrastructure media. And so Cat 6, a whole lot less expensive than a bunch of copper multicore. So that was kind of what got me thinking about it. And again, my message to you all is if you're like, this looks really cool, is it too good to be true, all that, my experience has been, again, on the smaller side, my experience has been, no, it's not too good to be true. Feel free to dive in and take a look. A little bit of background about me so you can understand just kind of a context. I have an IT background, not really a hardcore, down-in-the-weeds IT type guy, but one of those guys that's knows enough to be dangerous. Kind of a generalist in that I understand some about sysadmin stuff. I understand some about networking, and if you want me to create a directory on a Linux box, I can do that, but I got to Google it how to, so I can do some basic stuff. So I'm not a real deep, hardcore IT guy. It's important to note that should help a lot of you that might not be yourselves. I originally tried Dante out of curiosity. I had a customer who had a Allen Heath console with a Dante card, got it for them, and then they had a computer, and it was silly stuff like, wow, we could avoid running a 3-foot analog cable between those two devices. Let's do it over Dante. And that caused my belief to go up, and I began to use it more. The second installation that I used Dante on was a church that was growing and was doing a live stream. And as you know, the house mix doesn't work very well for the live stream feed, and so they needed a broadcast console, and we already had Dante in place in a very small segment of the operation, and so we got another console, plugged a network card in the back, and sent 48 channels over to it, and it's just worked. So like I said, it scales very quickly as long as you understand a few basic things. I'll talk about those a little bit later. I've also used it in a portable church scenario. So this church was meeting in a 650-seat high school auditorium. The school did allow us to install some network cable. So we ran a few network cables ran a few Cat 6 from the stage area to the front of house area, and built them a rack, and they roll the rack in, and it has two network connections, one for house network and one for D-Snake for the mixing console, and that was how they connected up the console. I mean, they did have a computer or two sitting next to it, and that was analog, but it was just a matter of plugging in the network cable. It wasn't going in the back and sticking, a giant L-code connector and a bunch of XLRs in there, which was nice. And so let's move on to the next page. And as you can imagine, it made my life easier. And I started thinking, wow, this analog cable stuff is kind of old. And here's what happens. Someone spoke earlier today about designing on the fly, which happens a lot in my environments, as you can imagine, because I'm working with organizations that don't necessarily know how to spec and bid things. And so I have to deal as well with didn't we tell you about that? And when you're designing, as you know, a copper infrastructure that's not Ethernet based or easily reroutable, forgetting to be told about a particular function can be multiple analog runs that are very, very costly. When I keep all of the audio in the Dante and the Ethernet domain using Dante, it's really, really easy to make changes. For example, at a church that wanted to start some translation for another language, and so we got them the traditional translator FM antenna, but the infrastructure had been done. They didn't have much budget. Well, that's okay. We'll use Dante. We got a Studio Technologies announcer console, which has the headphone out and the microphone in, Dante in and out. And they said, "Where does this person have to sit?" I said, "Wherever there's network connection." I plugged that into the house network and did it all through Dante. And oh, by the way, I needed to do some massaging of the audio, so I wanted to compress it and put an automatic level control on it and all that. And I happen to have a Media Matrix DSP in this system, so I just sent it in through Dante into that, the processed audio out to Dante to the transmitter. So super easy, super flexible. And again, for cost as well, Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable is about the least expensive cable in bulk that you can buy in our world. And of course, you heard me discuss about changing needs and how easy it is to adapt. I think I mentioned most of this. Yep. Been through that already. So again, talking from the heart. But regarding support, I do occasionally, and it took some training, and it becomes something that I've trained most of the organizations I work with to get their terminology right. In the IT world, I used to get calls that said the Wi-Fi was down, and I'd, remotely connect to a device, or I'd go out and I'd look at their laptop, and I'd say, no, it's connecting to the Wi-Fi access point just fine. Oh, I can't get to the internet. Oh, so the internet's down. Is that different than the Wi-Fi? So you'll have that with Dante if you start using it occasionally. And what I try to teach my clients is there isn't like this central magical black Dante box stuck in the network somewhere. And yes, a Dante component could fail in one of these other devices, but 99% of the time, it's not Dante that's down. There is some network issue perhaps that has thrown us for a loop. And so, I mean, it's just a terminology change. I try to help them learn. What I found the first time before I understood the terminology, it was really important. I find it's really easy to give a device or a brand bad name. Oh, we're always having problems with that Dante thing, right? I wanted to avoid that, and it worked really well. Just a couple tips that are real important. If you don't have control over the house network, especially at a smaller organization, especially in a smaller organization where lots of people may be plugging things in and out of a network, and there isn't an on-site network technician, You might want to create a separate audio network with hard switches, and chances are in a small network that's just a couple of pieces, and you can keep things off of the building LAN. However, in my instance, I usually want to be able to move audio everywhere I can in the facility, and so I do usually use the same LAN. And you can use VLANs to segregate stuff if you find it's really important, but it really depends on your particular implementation, and you know your clients better than I would. A little bit about, again, always consult with Audinate on the best practices, but had an interesting thing happen with one client. We had an electrical power panel that had a web server in it, and we upgraded the controller board in it. And there was a bug in the very early version of software in that this controller was designed also to perhaps be the brain of its own network, and so it had its built-in DHCP server. The check mark to disable that wasn't functioning, and so we installed this, and this client happened to be kind of far away from me, and away I went. And we had that was pretty much, can honestly say, the first and only issue I had around the Dante network. Turned out that this box was handing out IP addresses in a different range than the rest of the network, and we had all of our Dante devices on DHCP, and as their leases were expiring, this was really fun to figure that one out, if you can imagine. As their leases were expiring, they were grabbing new IP addresses from this other box, which was sort of handing them out just a little bit faster than the house network. And again, if there's no DHCP server, of course, Dante just self-assigns and away it goes. But if there is one, it will grab it. So the fix to that, to make the audio network real stable, just in case anything got plugged in that shouldn't have been plugged in, was to use static IP addressing. It worked real well. And let me give you a little chat about this one church that I was able to do. I live in San Jose, California, and this church is 2,500 miles away in the island of Hawaii. And it's been fun, and the support has been zero with regard to a Dante network. The facility has one house Ethernet network, and it's just a bunch of Cisco SG200 series small business switches. Only configuration built into them or changed in them is turning off of the green Ethernet functionality so that the ports don't go to sleep. There are no VLANs. I should actually say there are no VLANs for the Dante network. We do have one VLAN for Wi-Fi guest traffic, and I'm not really a VLAN rocket scientist. I get things conceptually, but when I started looking in the interface to figure out how to set up a VLAN, for some reason, I just really struggled. We got it going, and but on that network, there's no other VLANs, just to keep the Wi-Fi guests away from things. We use an Allen Heath GLD80 with a Dante option card, Media Matrix DSP, Stewart Audio breakout boxes for various locations, and also this is the one that has the Studio Technologies announcer console, and multiple instances of Dante Virtual Sound Card. That one single network has Dante data and internet on it, Wi-Fi and guest network. It has, for side screens, it's got JPEG 2000 streaming live video boxes. Again, so side screens in the sanctuary are fed over the house network using this technology from Aurora Multimedia. We're doing some DMX over Ethernet. There are live security cameras in the facility, 8 of them. VPN remote admin, about 14 channels of Dante at various locations throughout the facility, and media computers are being direct fed with Dante Virtual Sound Card into the audio, downstairs to the live mixing console. And oh, by the way, the mains left and right are over Dante with no analog backup. Never had an issue. It's really rock solid. And it's really interesting what happens to those of you that are got the audiophile ears. It's really interesting what happens when you keep your audio out of the digital to analog to digital to analog to digital to analog and back to digital again domain. This facility has only one media type, and that's Cat6 in the entire facility, with the exception of the amplifiers to the loudspeakers. I'd done those with Cat6 if they made them in high enough gauge. So, and again, rock solid to date, pretty fun. A couple of patch panels around the facility. Oh, you need a Reason I chose Cat 6 is, we did shielded just because while we're in there, if I needed 4 analog audio from one place to the other, I could patch it through the same Ethernet infrastructure. So it's worked really, really well. Just a couple of tips again. Always take the tips from me in the context of whatever Audinate says to do. This is from me in my world with my small clients. I avoid giving customers Dante controller, mostly because I'm dealing with customers that are trying to fix things on the fly, and they don't really fully understand the entire ramification of whatever they're doing. And so, it's the kind of place where, I've got them all using enterprise hardware now, but they'll think the first thing to do is boot the box, right? That'll fix it. And I just find that putting them in Dante controller is, a little bit more than they need. When if I just create the lanes of audio that move around the network the way we need to move them, they can do their patching, if you will, from whatever their end user device is, whether it be the console or something like that. It's worked really, really well for me. And that adds stability, again, to organizations that don't have take the time to learn the depth of what they're about to monkey with. Learn your device mix, the different hardware platforms. We talked heard other folks talk a little bit about Master Clock. One of the things that tripped me up very early on is that we had the Allen Heath digital console with the Dante option card, and in that network we wanted the Dante card to be the master clock for everything. And I'm not the brightest guy in the shed sometimes, and in the panel on the Allen Heath it said slave to external sync, and I went, no, the Dante card is in the console, it's not external. Well, as far as the mixer's ecosystem is concerned, that was an external device, and once we got over that, we get green lights everywhere, so that's good stuff. Prepare your network. In my case, the Cisco SG200 series small business switches have worked well. I always buy bigger switches than I need because I figure that extra headroom in the switches CPU is not a bad thing. A Cisco SG200 26-port switch is, under $300. So, and if you go down at half those number of ports to the 18-port unit, it's $200. So again, not a big deal to have all that extra horsepower. I have, in my experience, every once in a while you'll get that clicking, and it's usually if it's not because of your clock sync, it's usually because you've got green Ethernet turned on, and some of those ports are going to sleep to save energy, and that's not a happy moment for the audio that's in real time, right? So. That's really it. I just wanted to give you some confidence that a little guy like me is having great success, and it's allowing my clients and my customers or allowing me to bring to my clients what I love to do, which is bring them more technology than they could normally have exposed to them through a traditional model. And it's worked really, really well. I believe we're a fraternity and a community, so if there's anything I can do to help you or your teams get confident about Dante from my small experience, I'm happy to do that. You've got my contact information there. And with that, I'd love to ask if we have any questions. Do we have time, Irvin? I think we do. Questions? Yes, sir. I have accounts from Pennsylvania to Hawaii. Because I don't have trucks and drive around and do installation, I sort of just go wherever I get called. And I also look for a particular client that fits my style, and it's real easy to tell. I don't need 100 clients, I just need 20 good ones, and it's usually really, really good to find a fit. There are a lot of customers that really need a turnkey integrator that's local, and I'll be the first to tell them I'm not your guy. Great question. Other questions? Looks good. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thanks. Honor to speak to you.